Welcome back, everyone, to week 8 of the weekly workshop for Qlik, brought to you by the ARC Academy. You're with myself, JC, and Austin here. Today, we're going to cover wireframing and app design, specifically in terms of Qlik Cloud. So, the purpose of today's session is that you first started using Qlik. You pretend you've just opened, someone shared a dashboard with you. This is one of your first times maybe seeing someone else's work. Maybe you've just built your first application, and now you're starting to actually say, okay, how can I make this look like something usable? How can I make this usable for this audience or this group or this type of user? How is it going to provide them more value? Because, at the end of the day, adding a pie chart in a corner and adding a KPI isn't always just a dashboard. Just because it is a dashboard doesn't make it a good one. So let's jump into some of the thought process here. And a lot of the dashboard principles that I really want to touch on here are really, can really be applied to any type of mobile interface, whether you're talking about an iOS application, a web application, a website, right? It needs to be user-centric. These things need to be something that, depending on if you're a manager or if you're an employee, what views are you going to access when you first open this? That's going to be a huge determining factor of making a dashboard go from something like this to something like this, where you have, if you're a manager on a team, you're going to be focused on managing your employees, managing those metrics. And if you're an employee, you're going to be focused on managing the workload. And those are two completely different use cases for two completely different audiences. The other thing to kind of think about as you start processing this flow is your information hierarchy. Right away when someone opens the dashboard, you got to think about this. A dashboard and a Qlik application is a collection of dashboards. So it doesn't just have to all end on one sheet. And I see that happen a lot. So think about it as separating the first dashboard into sheet number 1. That's your landing page. That's your one-stop shop. That's your, hey, what is this about? Inform the user. Don't just start blasting them with data and KPIs, and this case ID has this. Let them know why they're here, what purpose it's serving, and who this is for, where the data is coming from, information. And then your dashboards 2, 3, and 4 can actually start showing you the analytics and drill down. So think about how you're presenting that information like a book. You have to have an introduction chapter. You have to build up, and then you have that catalyst to carry the user through their navigation of the information. Some other items on here, minimalism and spacing. These are two big things just in any type of web design. You don't need to crowd the page. This is a good example here from before and after, where in this dashboard, you can convey a lot of information in a little amount of space by how well you use it. Using white space can be just as valuable too, by using reference lines, using colors. All of those things can be intentionally displayed to show different values that in other cases you might have to use another chart for. You can eliminate that stuff. Again, coming back to the audience and context, this is key here. Anytime you're informing the user, it's always good. Maybe add a data dictionary on the landing page, add data labels, add tooltips, pop-ups, hoverovers. We'll talk about some more examples here when Austin gets into that. But it all comes back to the user experience and the user interface. So if you ever hear someone talking about UX and UI, this is exactly what they mean. And this is not just for a Qlik application dashboarding, it's for any type of user experience. Even when you're going through a kiosk at the mall, there's a lot of thought and intent that goes into how the user is going to navigate those buttons in the order that they click them in. And then the last thing that we'll talk about here if we have time is getting these applications mobile ready. Qlik is very good at being adaptive to the screen in a lot of different ways, whether it's a different resolution, a different screen size, but that can make things a little complicated when it comes to mobile. So we'll talk about some tips and tricks here to be able to cover that adaptive responsiveness as you start looking at things on a mobile device. Another slide here, again, just showing some examples of screenshots of a little more, well-designed applications. But really what we're going to focus on is that as you start building these out, you can build a dashboard, a really nice style dashboard in 5 minutes, and you can build it in 5 hours. But the attention to detail is what's going to matter. The purpose. Why are things in the places that they are? Why are the colors laid out the way they are? how consistent is the color used across the dimension or measure, all these things, whether if they're done without intent, the user can start to make inferences and interpretations of the data that just aren't there or shouldn't be there. They shouldn't be trying to make connections that aren't there. And then the last thing, touching on contrast, you'll see in some of these examples where these buttons, we've chosen to make these a green when they're selected, blue when they're not. So when these layers are turned on, in this case, we had this, this was a crime dashboard where you can see the offenders in school zones. So you really want to try to highlight these dots. You'll see maps a lot, layers a lot, where they'll blend together and you can't really see different delineation of these two. But, we have a lot of layers turned on here, a lot of information between schools, a walking distance, offenders, grocery stores, and a county outline, all very neatly displayed without making you really question what's going on here. Same thing in this visual to the top, right? I mean, we have a lot of different types of media here. We have a mapping layer, we have trends over time, we have KPIs about medication, trends, distribution plots, and even different types of picture and media graphics embedded. So really, again, attention to detail and the messaging of how you utilize these dashboards and utilize the Qlik objects at hand are what makes a dashboard successful. So the last thing to talk about before we get into Austin here is to answer this question to yourself whenever you're building, is that what story is your data telling? And to add to that, who are you telling it to? If you can answer those two questions, what am I trying to tell the audience and what audience is that, you'll be very successful in building some high quality dashboards.
Okay, so taking everything that JC went through and kind of distilling it into a dashboard here, we're basically taking on the role of a security manager at a campus, like a school campus, and I have this data set with all my IoT devices. So I need an overview of all the metrics around that. I need it kind of higher level and giving me a snapshot of the status of these devices and some information around that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this sheet here. So we're starting fresh, or just taking what I have now and running with that. I'm going to go ahead and change the theme so that I can get some better color options. I'm going to change it to Sense Breeze, and I'm also going to turn off the hover menu for visualizations. And then I'll go ahead and add a background color to add a little pop. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and rename my sheet. So I'm going to make it easy to understand and tailored to my audience. So this is an overview of devices. All right. So right at the top, we already have KPIs, but we're going to want to, before we even mess with the canvas and anything like that, or what's on the canvas, I'm going to change the grid spacing to narrow. This will allow us to be a little more granular with our objects as far as spacing goes. So at the very top, I'm going to add filter panes, or a single filter pane. And this is really important because we want to kind of go from a top-down approach. And this will allow us to keep all of our filters at the top, which just kind of logically helps a lot because the selections bar is already at the top of the page. So I will go ahead and add in my filters. I'm going to include building, category. I'm going to include status. And then I'm also going to include, for my master measures, I'm going to include the install date. So using master measures and dimensions is really important because it gives you consistent styling and allows you to iterate quickly over your dashboard. So with these KPIs here, I'm going to go ahead and shift these over here to the left side, just like so. And so when I do that, I get my KPIs. I keep my KPIs at the top, but I just give them kind of their own area. And I'm also going to style these. So this is going to be number of devices, just like that. And what I can do is I can actually turn this into a master measure as well. So after I format it as a whole number and give it a title, I'm going to go ahead and create a new master item with the number of devices and the count of device ID. go ahead and create that. So now I'll be able to reuse that throughout my dashboard. All right, so I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to use a master measure here as well. And go ahead and make the colors consistent. That's another important aspect here is consistency and keeping things kind of the same hue. All right, so after we've done that, I'm going to go ahead and clean up the chart here. So this bar chart is currently showing the count of devices and manufacturer. As a manager, I want that to be a little more useful. That the manufacturer isn't really telling me anything. So instead, I'm going to change this to use the next manufacturer or the next maintenance month, right? So I'll sort that on next maintenance month, and I'll make it so that the more recent stuff shows up at the top or the left side. And then I'm going to turn this into a horizontal chart so it's a little easier to read, all right? I'll make the bar visible there. And then what I can do is add value labels so that we can see what the actual numbers are on top of the bars. And then I will also include a reference here that shows the current month so that we can quickly and easily see that. All right, so that shows up there. And I'll just make that a color that pops out a little more. And there we go. So now we can see the current month and see into the future in the next few months when the number of devices we expect to need maintenance. All right. All right, so we've added our title there, and then I'll also use that master measure in here as well so that it's consistent formatting. All right, and so now what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and add a line chart at the bottom here. So I'll bring in my line chart just like so. And what I will do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make it so that we see last online, which is actually a master measure I have, or master dimension rather. And then I'll do the number of devices. All right, so this shows up pretty well, but I want to turn that into an area just to get some color. And I don't need a mini chart. And then I will add data points to make that a little simpler to see. We can even add value labels so we can see the exact number of devices at any given moment in time there. All right, so this is last time online, or rather last date online. All right, so now I can see the number of devices that have been online throughout time. So if there's a dip, maybe there was a moment in time where multiple devices were offline, and I might want to investigate that. All right, so I still have this pie chart up here. Right now it's showing other is that gray mark there. So let's go ahead and add in our master measure. And I'm going to take off the fixed number limitation so we can see all of the device types there. All right. So then we'll make the label a little easier to see. And then up here, I'll just put device types, just like that. All right. And then the next thing I'm going to add is a tree map. So I can search here for tree map and add that in. And I'll resize it here a bit. And so for this one, I'm going to want to see status and category. So I'll pop over here to status, bring that in, and category. So then I can see the status and category of my devices. So I can investigate if there are certain categories of devices that are currently offline or not. Just help me get a sense of if we need extra maintenance for certain device types. All right, so we have that status and category, just like that in the title. And then finally, I'm going to add a gauge so that we can view uptime in a more consistent or easy to read manner. And so uptime is a measure here. So I'll add that. I'll do the average uptime so we can see that. All right. Average uptime percentage in the title there. Okay. So now we've got a number of measures here and metrics that we've quickly styled and have made it really simple to see. It's nice because we have a little bit of gap between each of these, and they're very distinct and in their own area. And it's very much top down, where we see our quick numbers here, along with our filters that we can quickly and easily select to drill into our data. We also have some slightly more involved, but still higher level charts up here with our pie chart and our tree map and our gauge, just to give us some quick information or things that we can drill into in a very shallow or quick manner. And then below all that, we have our bar chart, which is a little more involved and has a few, you know, a lot more information for us to look at. We can easily scroll to see farther into the past. And then, of course, we have our line chart here, which over time is going to grow and allow us to see those trends in our information. And so as a manager, I see everything I need to see from a good, clean, high-level view.